Welcome back to Unfiltered and Unbound. I'm your host, Kate. Today we're talking about money, specifically the money conversations we need to be having in our 50s and beyond. It's about super, building wealth, and about what financial independence really looks like when you're the one in charge of it. And we have a return guest. So Jo Hurley spoke about her triathlon journey in season 1, and that episode is the most streamed episode of this podcast across both seasons. But today, we're not talking about sport. Today, we're talking to the professional Jo, chartered accountant and self-managed super specialist, and someone who has spent her entire career helping women understand the one asset most of us were quietly taught not to look at too closely. One quick caveat before we dive in, because this really matters. So this is not financial advice. We are talking in generalities here. So if something strikes a chord with you and you want advice for your own situation, please go and get it properly. Think of this episode as a nudge and not the plan. Let's get ready to talk about money. Hi, Jo, and welcome back to Unfiltered and Unbound.
Thanks so much, Kate. I'm really delighted to be back.
And I'm actually really excited to have you back because your previous episode, where we did talk about your personal triathlon journey, is currently sitting as the most streamed episode across both episodes of the podcast. So clearly your story has resonated with many of our listeners, which is fantastic. But today we're here to talk about something different, and it's not triathlon. It's the money conversations that we need to have in our 50s and beyond. And as we were just chatting in the preamble before I hit record, talking about reframing some of the conversations and the narratives that women need to have around money, wealth building and super. I will jump in with a quick caveat here first, though. This is not financial advice. We are talking in generalities. So if any listeners do want to seek out any personal financial advice, please seek that out individually. So welcome back, Jo. We'll start with your background to give us sort of the high level overview. Obviously the listeners will know you as a triathlete. Let's talk about the professional Jo.
Yeah, and I did in the previous episode talk a little bit about my journey and my passion for self-managed super funds specifically. But essentially, I, for some unknown reason, had a very, very early young desire to become an accountant. I can remember in primary school saying that was my life's ambition. I have no idea why.
Wow.
But I did, in fact, follow that path, which very fortuitously landed me straight out of high school into Deloitte, which is one of the big national, international accounting and financial advice practices. And they put me into the superannuation department. So from a very early, age, I have been very interested and involved in retirement savings, specifically in Australia, and become very passionate about the power that superannuation has, particularly for women, but also for just everyday mum and dad Aussies. And we have some really unique opportunities in this country that are not available in any other country. And a lot of people aren't aware how lucky we are in Australia that super has been a huge priority in this country for a very long time.
That's fantastic. It's sort of rare that you know what you want to do from a young age, but it can be exceptionally reassuring to watch someone go out there and hit all their goals.
Yeah, and it has been life-changing, not just for me. I mean, I was a kid getting into this, but for my family, for me to be able to get that education and be able to take that back into my family to help my parents and grandparents and aunties and uncles and things as well. It's been not only rewarding professionally, but also just in my own real life situation as well, which just goes to show the power of education.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. So, as you said, you have worked across super, finance, business, and technology. What have you noticed about the way or how women talk or don't talk about money?
Yeah, look, I think that money conversations for women can be very challenging. I think there's a bit of a cultural element of women feeling like it's not polite to raise money, or that they're going to, upset someone else or kind of impact a relationship or how they're perceived because they want to talk about money. So it can be that women feel it's rude, or that they'll be perceived in a certain negative way if they're steering conversations towards the money conversation. And I think as well that there's an element of shame or embarrassment
Yeah.
as well. And actually, particularly with women who have had a quite successful career, they're achieving a lot in their career and they've been successful in whether that's as a mother or in the workforce. So kind of admitting weaknesses, particularly in finances, can be pretty challenging. So it's often one of those things where if I go to have a conversation about superannuation with women, that they kind of get a bit uncomfortable about where they're at
Mm.
and really nervous about not being able to answer questions or really not knowing where they're at or how to improve it.
So, do you think women are still socialized to avoid those conversations, or have you seen a change as you've progressed through your career?
No, I think it's still a very current problem. Discrimination in the workforce, in communities, in advertising, those
Mm.
things still exist. In some respects, I feel like they're getting worse. And we're seeing that in the statistics as well. Pay gaps and gaps in superannuation are really not improving at the rate that you would think they would be. And yes, there's more access to online information and education, but I think the stigma still remains. And there's still just a lot of gender stereotypes that exist and narratives that you even hear in our children, the younger men
Mm.
that are concerning. So it is very important that women are supporting each other, getting in the right rooms, having the right conversations.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, as you said, there's a lot of shame associated with that, and we need to start having. I guess the way to get over that is to talk about it and have more practice at talking about it. Now, you did briefly mention the statistics there, and I know that
Mm.
you've got some. Do you want to quickly run through those stats?
Yeah. So I've got good news and bad news here. So there are some really good stats, and then there's stats that remain of concern. So I guess in terms of what I did mention there was the gaps that exist still. So the gender pay gap still remains very high. So on average across the workforce, the gap is quoted anywhere from 15 to 21% still that women are
Hmm.
earning less than men. So that statistic is not looking at same job, same pay. It is across the entire workforce. So it
Okay.
also looks at things such as the pay rates for female dominated roles, for example, and how they compare to more male dominated industries, which actually is still a significant issue. So, how much overall across the workforce women are underpaid by around that 20%? That is one factor in the superannuation gender gap, which
Hmm.
unbelievably, women are still retiring with 25% less in their super than men. That's a significant amount of money. And has real life impact for women as they look to plan their retirement and basically look at when can they leave the workforce and how long is that money going to last. Women on average are still living longer than men as well. So
Yeah.
women live
Hmm.
on average 4 years longer than men. That gap is actually reducing, but women's average life expectancy is 85 and men is 81. So women need their money to last longer as well. On the flip side, there are some really positive statistics. Women's financial well-being in general is being tracked a lot better. So we do have access to good information. And what that means is these conversations are being had in the finance industry, in the superannuation industry. Stats are readily available. And what that means is this isn't a hidden problem, it's a known problem. And once something is known, and out there publicly, it does put pressure on the policymakers and the advisors working in this space to be able to be part of the solution
Hmm.
and to help resolve these issues. There is a whole cohort of women that actually are in much stronger financial positions than women in previous generations who have been able to successfully save a larger superannuation balance over their lifetime. And so I think an element is that women are actually doing better, but men are also doing better. So the gap isn't closing because of some of the systemic issues, but overall, everyone is in a much better position than they have been in previous generations. So we are like kind of lifting together in some ways, which means without changing the systemic gender specific issues, the gap can't close, but everyone is lifting together, which is good. So I did have a role as head of growth at one of the largest superannuation software providers in the country. And I did a huge deep dive on women getting into SMSF. What do their superannuation balances look like over the period of their lifetime? And the most exciting statistic that I found in that study was that there is a period of time where women's balances are higher than men's overall.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and that's in the early 20s. So, and yes, at that point, superannuation balances tend to be fairly low. But because of compulsory super, we are seeing younger people with superannuation savings pretty early in their working lives because they're getting the benefit of compulsory super. So women are outdoing men early in their working lives. Unfortunately, once they get into those child rearing years and there's career breaks, part-time work, and that gap actually jumps very quickly once they get into their early 30s generally. And once the gap happens, it never closes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's very promising and hopeful that women are actually being exposed to super. They are in the superannuation system and they are establishing foundations. What we need to do is look at the gap when the gap happens and how can we take action to help women to close that gap.
No, that's fascinating. And I do know there have been some changes around superannuation or around policy recently with the federal budget.
Oh, it's actually been over a few years. Yeah, that we have. Yes,
Yeah.
the policy changes have been great.
And one of the ones that I was reading about the other day was about payday super, because I know some people may previously have had an issue with their superannuation being paid quarterly or half yearly, and some not seeing it at all.
Yeah, so payday super, you're spot on there. So that is the problem that has been solved by payday super. So effectively, payday super is coming in now, 1 July 2026. And that means when you get paid, the employer has an obligation to pay into the super at the same time, rather than that being quarterly and potentially raising cash flow issues with the employer, and just a lack of engagement, I guess.
Yep.
The idea is that if it's being timed with your pay, you're much more likely to notice if it isn't paid, and you're
Yeah.
much more likely to be able to take timely action to go and chase that up, should that be the case. And it also prevents blowouts with employers who may be experiencing financial trouble or who are just operating outside of the requirements, that not very long goes by without reporting obligations that would pick up that the appropriate level of super is not being paid. So that's a fantastic move that is definitely anticipated to help women particularly.
And also because, well, super is a product that works on compound interest.
That's right, because yeah, obviously if it's in your superannuation fund, it's effectively in your hands earning a rate of return on that money from the day that it arrives. So yes, I totally agree with that as well. It's superannuation is amazing in the compounding effect because it's over your entire lifetime.
Mm.
Contributions and the timing of those contributions and the return on that, just it doesn't matter whether you're a high income earner or a low income earner, but everyone benefits from that long term compounding benefit over time. So yes, I'm yet to see modeling specifically about how payday super is likely to increase the average superannuation balance over time, but I do believe that it's likely to be quite significant. Some of the other legislative changes, we also had 1 July 2025 paid super on Commonwealth paid parental leave. So that's estimated to add just over $7,000 a year to the super balances of around 170,000 women per annum, which is significant. That what we want to see is more of that. So that's specifically on the Commonwealth paid parental leave, but essentially super on paid parental leave across the board is something that we need to continue pressure on, because making sure that everyone who's on paid parental leave has access to that benefit is really important, because $7,000 now in 30, 40 years time is a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
And yes, yes. And in the modeling that we did, having a look at that critical period where women go from having more in super to dropping below men and never recovering, the critical amount was only around $10,000 if there was a contribution in that age. So if you had a female kind of around that late 20s, early 30s, and an additional 10,000 was kicked in at that point in time, the gap wouldn't have formed.
Wow. Okay.
So one of the interesting strategies that I was proposing, and I'm hoping that this goes some way towards it, but just for families to particularly consider making contributions for their daughters,
Mm.
just a voluntary contribution of $10,000 into their daughter's super in their 20s, late 20s, for example, just to help assist with stopping that gap from occurring, so that as they get older, they're going to be on the level footing to their
Footing.
brothers,
Yeah.
essentially. Yeah.
Great idea. We'll move on just slightly. So we've talked about some historical and contextual and systemic issues relating to superannuation. We've talked about the stats around gender pay gap, and we do know that women are now living longer than men, as you mentioned. So once a woman actually does get into late 40s, early 50s, and dare I say it, retirement is on the horizon. Well, it's certainly a lot closer than what it is when you're
Yes.
20.
It's feel more real.
It is starting to feel more real. So, what are the money conversations that we need to stop avoiding?
I I think that it's just really important that money conversations are happening, and making a safe space within the family home and the family relationships to talk about money is a very important step, which it takes an element of confidence and
Mm,
bravery to kind of open up those conversations. But from women who I've talked to who have had a lot of hesitation about doing that, but then they do and go and approach their spouse, their partner, their parents, their children, it can be such a great relief for
mm,
everyone to feel like, okay, this is a shared responsibility. This is actually okay to talk about, and I can talk about, because men have financial fears as well, and men can feel a lot of responsibility. And
mm.
so women that I've spoken to who have like kind of sucked it up and started the conversations have said that normally they go very well, because it's taking these hidden pressures and unspoken concerns and kind of put it on the table. And there can often be a lot of gratitude for that. It's really important that it's done in a positive way, and that it kind of comes from, I guess it's just in the way that you go about it. I've heard an interesting reflection around the importance of having eaten before you have the conversation. And it's funny how like these little
Ah,
things can make a huge difference. That people who are hungry or tired or just physically uncomfortable, or there's been a recent argument or something like that, timing is so important. So
yeah.
having a conversation kind of well fed, like in a good place, it's kind of, you've picked a good time to have those conversations is really important.
I'm going to make
But
a note. Don't
yeah,
have a conversation
don't have
hangry.
a hangry financial conversation.
Don't have a hangry money
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. I know. It's just like one of those little hints that I thought it was actually super interesting. But the worst thing you can do is just out of fear, not raise the conversation, not
Yeah.
ask the questions. It is such a freeing thing for everyone involved to be able to have those conversations, and also to set example for your children that they are part of the conversation, that you want them to be learning from you. You set the example for them and the way that they talk about money, and also their awareness of the things that could go right, the things that could go wrong as they grow and get into relationships of their own as well. You want them to learn from your experience. And the best way to do that is actually to talk to them.
Yeah.
Parents can be harder, I think, because you've got an older generation, and their approach to money conversations, it can just be harder to deal with. But again, the worst thing you can do is put that off until it's too late, and they're struggling to communicate, or it's just not the right time to be having those conversations. It is much harder and more sensitive to have money conversations when someone is dying, for example, than if
Mm-hmm.
it's happened
Yep.
before the diagnosis, before any kind of major crisis. Crisis make everything much more emotional and
Yeah.
challenging, and they can be seen as the wrong way. A lot of family damage can happen when financial conversations are suddenly raised when someone's deathly ill. It's just not a good time. It's a kindness to have it when they're well.
I absolutely agree with you there. And I had posted a sort of a short take on this, just sort of coming from personal experience or lived experience with, so my mother's generation, females didn't talk about money. You don't worry your pretty little head about money. That's a job for your husband to look after. And even though she did work for most of her life, she didn't manage the money. And it became a very, very big problem when my father passed away suddenly, and she didn't know details to the bank account. She didn't know what super funds were. She knew nothing. And it's very, very difficult
Yeah.
to obviously try and navigate your way through a very, very stressful financial situation when you're dealing with the passing of a loved one. And you realize that then should have had this conversation earlier. So it's very, very difficult and hard situation to navigate if you haven't had those conversations, as you say. So it is probably more of a kindness to broach those up front. So now we have talked about the shame a little bit, about women feeling embarrassed to discuss finances. So for the woman who does feel embarrassed because she doesn't know anything, what would you suggest would be somewhere for her to start?
Seeing a financial advisor is a really, really good idea.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
and unfortunately, we do have challenges in this country around the number of financial advisors and the affordability or lack of affordability of financial advice. But I would say that it is such a great investment for all the things
Mhm.
that we spend money on. Whether you see how much a financial advisor needs to charge to be able to give you good quality advice and assess that as being valuable or not. We need to be really careful with those things to look at the long-term view of that investment in good financial advice and how that can really play out in terms of long-term wealth. It's a spend today that just will pay off for the rest of your life. And I do think it's really important to have someone support you through the process. I have a financial advisor and pretty much always have. It's funny, people wait to engage with a financial advisor until they're wealthy. They think financial advisors are for the wealthy. How do they think people got wealthy? You don't wait until you're skinny to go to the gym. You shouldn't wait to be rich to go and get financial advice. It's just a fundamental change in thinking around the value of a financial advisor and who they are for. Yes, the marketing of financial advice tends to be towards wealthier people, but I can tell you the people that get the greatest value out of proper financial advice is people who actually need it and are at a position where there's a big gap from where they are and where they'd like to be. So getting good financial advice is really important. We can't just assume that all women are behind and that all women are in this lesser financial position and have a big gap and are going to struggle, I guess, in terms of getting to where they want to be when they retire. There's a lot of strategies for those women, absolutely, which we're going to talk about. But there are also a lot of women who I think miss out on the level and quality of financial advice that men tend to get because of that assumption that women have less than men. And so I think in one of your podcasts, you were talking about that marketing opportunity, the gap
Yeah.
of speaking to women who do have disposable income or have accumulated wealth. Are they getting access to the same level of quality advice and the same kind of strategies that men in their position or in a similar kind of position are getting access to?
Probably hazard a guess and say no, but let's not assume.
I can mainly go by the conversations that I see and the marketing that I see, and also knowing the very proactive steps that I've had to take to seek that advice for myself as well, and to make sure that there's not biases and assumptions happening within the advice that I get that assume that certain strategies don't apply to me. And I've been really conscious of making sure that if there's a strategy that helps my superannuation to grow, that I've had a conversation about it, I've got advice about it, and I've implemented that strategy so that I can get myself in a similar position than a man who is earning the same or more than me, because I don't want to be disadvantaged because there's biases and assumptions that are being made that something that I might not be interested in something or I might not understand it in any way, because that's just not the case.
I can see two distinct streams coming through here. And one is, yes, there will absolutely be some women out there who are ashamed and they don't know where to start when it comes to their finances, and they might still be too embarrassed to talk about them. And we absolutely need to empower those women to start having those conversations, because it's not a shameful conversation and it is
No.
something that's extremely important. But then on the other side of that, that second stream is those women who have gone out there, have been building wealth, not being offered the same opportunities as men, but getting biased advice that is assuming that because they're women, their investment strategies are going to be different. And to be honest, first coming into this podcast, I hadn't thought about that angle. So I'm really, really
Yeah.
glad that you brought it up, because having, or sort of resetting that framework around the whole thing and exploring it all from two different angles is fantastic. I guess I do want to start to talk about some of the practical strategies now that women can apply if they either want to start, because I'm going to say it's never too late to start. Don't assume just because you're 50 and retirement's sort of staring you in the face that it's too late to start. Absolutely, you can start now. But also perhaps some practical strategies for those women who are already on that path. So we've got those two different areas of focus.
Yes. Yeah, we definitely do. So, look, you're 100% correct. It is never, ever too late to start. That's true of anything in life, but it is particularly true of superannuation, because even if you are, like at the end of the day, you can only start where you are. The
Yep.
important thing is that you know where you are, okay? And that if you're not happy where you are, and things need to change, that today's the day.
Yes.
Today's the
Yep.
day where we get really clear where are we, and we just get super clear on that, and then that we start looking at the things that we could do differently to get a better outcome for ourselves in the future. So what can I do on a regular basis that's going to shift the dial on what my future years look like? That's really important. Start where you are.
And I think that can potentially be really scary
Mm.
for someone, and it takes a
Yep.
lot of courage to decide that, yep, I want to start now. I want to understand what my finances look like. You might be one of those people who's scared of opening a bill,
Yes.
but and as hard and as difficult as that is, having the courage to start is just that first step.
Yeah. And look, this generation now, that's women in their 50s, they're like, honestly, most of them are much better off than their parents, because compulsory superannuation was brought in back in the 90s. So the vast majority of us have had superannuation contributions going through from employment at various rates and levels over a fairly long period of time.
Yep.
The superannuation system itself is much better equipped to give you more engaging information about, you can actually log into your super fund now and see what you've got, what the returns are like, what your contributions are like, what insurance you're paying. This information is a lot easier to get because the super funds are not just mailing you a cold statement once a year that truthfully a lot of us used to just throw in the bin and not even
Yeah.
look at, because we might not have even known how to read it, or just
Yeah.
had no connection. Super can feel so far away that it's not actually real money. But
Yeah.
as you get into your 50s, you start looking at that and realizing, my gosh, this is real money. I do need to think about how long this is going to last, because at some point I want to reduce my working. I want to stop working. I've got other goals in my life, and how am I going to pay for those? So engaging with the information, particularly that you have in relation just to superannuation savings, but also your entire wealth picture as well. What other assets do you have? I maintain a personal balance sheet that has all my assets on it. What money do I owe? And my assets includes my superannuation balance. And I look at that and I track that so that I know, like, if, for example, it's so important if you lose a job, if you're made redundant, if you have a relationship breakdown or a marriage breakdown, that you've got a good sense of what are the assets that I think belong to me. How much are
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
worth? What am I doing to protect those and make sure that, they're either in my name, I know where to find them, or if they're not in my name, whose name are they in? Like, who's actually controlling that? And what would happen? What would happen if the situation or the relationship broke down? to those assets, because superannuation is a big part of your wealth.
Yeah. Yep.
Most people, superannuation is the second largest asset they have behind the family home. But when it comes to any form of reality of like what is actually mine, that's important to establish. And
Yeah.
if you're not happy with the answers to those questions, then you're going to have some brave conversations and just make sure you get yourself into a position where you're happier with the answers to those questions.
I'm liking that. I think the tagline might be "Have the brave conversation."
Yeah, having brave conversations and putting aside how will I be perceived, trust in the process that you have the right to ask those questions. And we do all need to look after ourselves. And I think something that I've noticed with a lot of women is that if you kind of reframe that to the benefit that that has for other people, I think women can struggle to do it for themselves. But if you look at it as benefiting your children or your family in some way, and even your partner, like it is beneficial to everyone who you care about and love to have the confidence to have harder conversations and to be brave about asking the what ifs and, just establishing a bit more confidence in those things. It can reduce resentment. It can reduce fear. It can build and actually save relationships versus not having those conversations and having money problems and power struggles and all those kinds of things become the reason that things fall apart.
I think one of the key things there perhaps is to hope for the best but plan for the worst, because you just never know.
I would say that one of my critical recommendations is to never assume that your partner's going to provide for your retirement.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but it's just, you just cannot do that. The divorce rate, unfortunately, and I do have some stats on this as well. So, great, 1 in 3 divorces in Australia happens over the age of 50, and couples married for over 25 years make
Mm.
up more than 25% of divorces. So, grey divorce is very real, and the devastation that can come with outcomes not being what you expect in that process. Whether you've been the one who decided, it may be that the woman has decided and initiated the divorce. That doesn't mean that it's going to play out the way that you thought it would.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
it's really dangerous to assume that you're going to be able to access the partner superannuation balance in the divorce, or that they're going to provide for you in some way. Yes, it will feel completely unfair, particularly if you've spent many, many years in a relationship where you considered that you were building together.
Yeah.
And you get into all those conversations about you've only got that because I sacrificed this and all these kinds of things. But once things get in the hands of lawyers, it just depends on and I'll come back to it, the quality advice and support that your partner might have received over that period of time. You may well find that there's structures and strategies that have been there that may end up with you receiving less than what you thought.
Mm.
Your superannuation is your responsibility, and whose name that superannuation is matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I do think it's very valuable for women in relationships to have separate financial advice
Mhm.
to
Yep.
their partner, okay? Because when you see structures put in place, particularly where there's more wealth, there might be more complex structures. Yeah, but what's best, it may not be best for you.
Yeah.
Could be a relationship with a woman, relationship with a man. But again, it comes down to the dynamic of who has more and who has less, and just making sure that both of those people have had their own chance at their own advice as to what's going to be best for them as well, and how they can protect themselves. Because the divorce rates are still high. Grey divorce is very real,
Yes. Yep.
and starting again in your 50s or 60s is difficult.
Extremely difficult. Yeah.
It's really difficult. And the sad truth is that homelessness and difficulties in relation to just maintaining a basic standard of living, the very at risk age group is women in their 50s and 60s. They are experiencing homelessness, which they may not have ever thought would ever happen to them.
And particularly now in the current economic climate with the cost of living as well,
Yeah.
women coming out of a relationship and not having that shared pool of money where they may have been living a comfortable life, find
Yeah.
that they're now having to do that on a single salary if they are working, which is extremely difficult. So their quality of life has the potential to decline as well because they're not on a dual income. And that's some very real conversations that I have been having with women recently who have come out of a long term relationship struggling to deal with the financial ramifications of living on their own.
Yeah, and we know that the financial ramifications of divorce are worse for women than men. That's
Yep.
fact. Mm. You might not land in the position that you think you might. At the end of the day, the more brave you've been in the conversations and the more proactive you've been in making sure that you are in a good position, should that reality occur, is super important. But also, anything that's in your name and that you've accumulated, there's a very fair chance that you're going to keep that. So focus on what you can control as well, and take responsibility for your own super. And just be very aware that those things can change. I mean, yes, incomes, women are dealing with divorce, blended families. They're dealing with an increase in redundancy in those near to retirement years as well.
Yeah.
Difficulties getting re employed after redundancy. Just so many challenges. Um, and so, yes, it's just very important that, and that's why my number one recommendation is around getting qualified support. It just makes all the difference. I do see women trying to like struggle and do it on their own. I've had friends recently go through divorce and they just try and DIY,
Yep.
and they're
Yep.
just like trying to research everything, and they're using ChatGPT now, trying to like go and do it all themselves. And the mistakes that you can make, like, something's better than nothing. Educating yourself and using ChatGPT and using affordable options to get information and advice is useful. But considering the amount of years that it takes for professionals to build up expertise, I will do something in 2 minutes that might take you 3 months because I do it every day. And so the cost of you paying me to do something like that to help you, and me being able to be really straight to the point and to give you a bit of like moral and emotional support during the process as well, it's just invaluable. I can't even be more passionate about the importance of just getting people who are working for you, who know what they're
Yes. Yep.
doing, and do this stuff every day. Yeah.
Yep. So the importance of having someone on your team. Do want to start looking at practical options now. We talked about obviously understanding or knowing what your assets and your liabilities are. That's obviously a key item that you need to know. Now, if we have a look at women and their superannuation, I just want to perhaps give some practical
Yep.
tips. So, not financial advice, just
Yeah.
practical tips. If a woman is going to check her super this week, what are some of the things that she should be looking for when she logs into her superannuation account? So that's the first question. And the second one is when she is in there looking at this information, what are the questions that she needs to be asking?
Okay. So it is possible that a lot of people end up accumulating a lot of different superannuation accounts.
Mhm.
So just getting really clear that you've found all of your super. Like, is there any super in any accounts that you've maybe forgotten over time? So initially, yeah, that taking that approach of listing exactly what accounts do I have? What are the logins? Am I getting access to those so that I can see them? And in how many different funds do I have balances as well? And you can search for lost super. So if you type in, just Google search my lost super, you can put in your tax file number and details and look for any funds that you may have forgotten about over time. Then you want to have a look at, let's say it's all in one place. What are the contributions that have been going into the fund? Is that what I expected?
Yeah.
Is
Hmm.
what's in there what I expected it to be? Is it better or worse than what I thought? Is my employer actually paying contributions in
Yeah.
there? Does everything just look like you were expecting it to look like? Once you have a look and you're happy that, yes, my employer has been making those contributions, the balance looks like where I think it should be, starting to pay attention to the returns that are going into your account and what fees are coming out and what insurance that you might have in
Yeah.
there. So these larger super funds do have a lot more information available for you to have a look at. What investment choice is available in that fund? What investment choice have I made or has someone put me into? So you might have your money going into a balanced investment option, for example, or it might be in a more conservative investment model, or it could be in a more growth or aggressive kind of investment plan. And again, this is why investment advice, like it is actually really helpful to speak to an advisor. And initially, you might want to reach out to your super fund and consider speaking to someone there just for them to run through it with you and ask those questions. How much are you charging me? What insurance coverage do I have? Where would my super go if I died? Have
Yeah.
I nominated where that money should go? Who decides where that money goes? And what information have I given them? And an important consideration as well is, how are you passing that information on to your family? If something happens to you, how would they know where to find your super?
Yeah.
How would they know what insurance that you have, or potentially the process for applying to get benefits paid or released in the event that you were disabled, incapacitated in some way, or you're on your deathbed or dying? How is your family going to know how to access that? Have you had those conversations as well is really important. There will also be a lot of your listeners, I would say, that potentially have a self-managed super fund, which is quite a different experience and conversation, because in a self-managed super fund, you run that fund yourself, and it comes with a lot more responsibility, but also a lot of opportunity. You have a lot more control over where the money's invested. You have access to the bank accounts and the investment portfolio of that fund to be able to actually make investment decisions as well. So self-managed super funds, the really good news is that almost 50% of members of self-managed super funds are women. And the fastest growing segment is women in the age range of 35 to 44. So younger women are actually taking control of their super by setting up a self-managed super fund. And make no mistake, they're called self-managed super funds, but highly recommend that you're getting good quality advice
Yeah.
in that situation. It's a lot of responsibility. Self-managed super funds there's over $1 trillion of superannuation savings in that particular way of saving for your retirement. And it's a fantastic option, but it's not for everyone. But that conversation's quite different. It is just as important that you have a relationship with the advisor or the administrator or accountant looking after your self-managed fund, where they're actually giving you regular information on how much is in your superannuation account. What
Mm.
investment decisions should you be making? Are the fees appropriate? Is
Yeah.
your balance being eaten up in fees? Do you have the right insurance? Does your family know what would happen if something happened to you? They are the same conversations, but you have a lot more responsibility when you're running your own fund. And it's important to stay engaged no matter where your super is.
Yeah. I think that's good advice. Obviously, you don't want to be a financial ostrich and stick your head in the sand and
Absolutely
hope
not.
for the best.
But for many people, that's a natural reaction. I can
True.
guarantee you. So my business, when I actually had my own business in the self-managed super fund space, was called Engage for a reason,
Yeah.
because your financial outcomes, whether that's in superannuation or just across everything that you've earned and accumulated over your
Mm.
life, the more you are engaged in it and
Yeah.
the more that you're paying attention and setting goals and being active and taking responsibility, the better outcome that you'll have. And these are real life benefits of just a different standard of living and a better quality of life if you've been brave enough to do all the things that we've spoken of. There's a lot of other strategies that you can have a think about. Contributions is a really important one. At the end of the day, it's like anything. The more that you put in, the more that you will get out of superannuation. Once you've had a look at where you're at and you've got all the information around your fund itself, look at, what is my employer putting in? Is there a gap? Is there an opportunity for me to salary sacrifice? If you're in your 50s and you've got this shorter run, I call it the runway to retirement. So your runway to retirement is a lot shorter than it used to be.
Yep.
So every dollar today that you sacrifice into your fund, whether that's out of your salary or just making voluntary contributions, will help build that balance. And again, remember, it's not, that money's not just getting you to 65. It's going to be building until you retire. And then it is going to continue to earn a rate of return for many years into your retirement. The returns on that money will flow all the way through the rest of
True.
your life.
Yeah.
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 So salary sacrificing, can I sacrifice some of my salary? Let's say I get a pay rise, I get a bonus. Talk to your employer and see if you can put some of that into your superannuation. There's a lot of tax advantages in doing that. If you're self-employed, make sure that you are making contributions as though you are employed. Don't disadvantage yourself. Pay yourself first. Make sure that you're putting away for your own retirement. The more you put into super, the less you give to the tax office. And
Yeah.
I hate giving money. I hate paying tax. Who does yes, I didn't get into accounting to like generate tax dollars.
Yeah.
I got into it to help people keep more in their pocket.
Yeah.
And one way of doing that is to make contributions.
Yeah. No, I like that. No, I don't think anybody likes paying tax.
No, they do not. And that's one of the many advantages of the system that we have in Australia is that superannuation contributions attract a tax deduction. If you put your salary and you sacrifice that into super, you're going to be saving a lot of tax versus getting it in your own hands. So $1 in the super fund is worth more than $1 in your hand. Absolutely. So that's really important. Self-employed can also look at, so I just wanted to say, like I mentioned self-employed, if you are running your own business and you need an office space or your
Mm,
business is your super, there are
yeah.
a lot of strategies available. If you sell a business,
Yeah.
you can get significant tax advantages by taking some of the proceeds of the sale and putting that into your superannuation. That way, you're holding on to a greater proportion of the proceeds from the sale of your business than you would if you just were to take it and pay tax on it. You can buy a commercial premises, set up a super fund with that premises in it, and that is a really great strategy. There's a lot of strategies when you run your own self-managed super fund that you can look at, particularly if you're self-employed.
I was going to ask you a question about that, which is sort of slightly off topic. But with all the changes to CGT, capital gains tax, there's been a lot of talk
Mm.
on social media channels about small businesses and
Yep,
how in the early years, many of them don't pay themselves and they're risking quite a lot of capital there to get that business started and to grow. There's been a lot of hate online around I wasn't an overnight success. I spent 10 years building up this business. I finally make enough money for my retirement and the government's going to take half of it when I sell in capital gains tax. So
that's right.
and a
Yep.
lot of them, will say I'm not paying myself because I'm pouring all of my money back into the business. How am I going to think about super?
Yeah. And this is where self-managed super funds and that conversation is a really important element when you're looking at the overall structure of where you're holding in assets and where you're putting your money. Self-managed super funds are concessionally taxed. So assets held within a super fund and income going into that pays tax at only a rate of 15%
Oh, wow.
versus your
Okay.
marginal tax rate. So it's 15%. Gains if you've held an asset for more than 12 months, the capital gains tax rate is only 10% in a self-managed super fund. And then if you've retired, the tax rate is zero
Yep.
on
Okay.
income and capital gains. Okay. So this is why it is a very important strategy. And I would say, again, why leave those strategies to the wealthy? Because the
Yeah.
people who would benefit from those kinds of opportunities is actually the generations that aren't building from very much. So it's very important to see an SMSS specialist in relation to
Mm.
considering setting up a self-managed super fund and accessing some of those things. So yes, the tax rates in self-managed super funds are much better.
Yep.
Self-managed
Okay.
super funds can own investment property. It can own commercial property. There are some restrictions. You can't just buy a holiday house with your super or own your own home in your super. You can't live in a residential
Yeah.
property,
Okay.
but
Yep.
you can certainly own investment property in a self-managed super fund. It can even have gearing. But it's now with the budget changes, the again, the best structure for the tax position when it comes to holding assets. It's just knowing the rules that apply and what you
Yeah.
can and can't do. It's not a free for all. And the money and the benefits are all for your retirement. That's what I think is one of the, and I heard it a few times as you were talking to me, is this whole idea of, my business is my superannuation, my farm is my superannuation, my investment properties are my superannuation. If it's not in a superannuation fund, it's really not your superannuation. It's not enjoying all the benefits that it would if it was in superannuation, but it also doesn't have the protections either. So if you hold assets outside of a superannuation fund and you go bankrupt or something, like everything becomes unhinged, all those assets can be taken in bankruptcy. Superannuation is protected. So it's not just, there's many benefits of looking at having a self-managed fund, restructuring your investments and things so that you've got the protection of it being in super, you've got the tax advantages of it being in super, and also it's better for estate planning. In the event of your death, you have more control over the way that money is paid out, who it gets passed on to, and how that money flows into the generations. And look, that intergenerational, this is another opportunity that I think women in their 50s and 60s may not also realize, again, because they're probably being too polite and don't want to have these hard conversations because it's like, I don't want to talk to my parents about money. But there is a huge impending intergenerational wealth transfer that is going to be happening over the next decade or so, where baby boomers are going to be transferring wealth and assets at unprecedented levels to their children, and their children are in their 50s and 60s.
Yep.
And maybe their 40s. So millennials and Gen Xers, but effectively you're going to see wealth transferring down the family. So estate planning and talking about how that's going to flow, who would benefit from it most, and the best way for that transfer to happen, that is a family conversation. And it's not to be had once the funeral has happened. That is just it's such a waste. If our parents have worked for so long and so hard to get themselves in a better position for the benefit of the family, then making sure that all the mechanisms and all the conversations are there and they've been had and everything's set up to have that transfer of wealth go in the best interest of everyone in the family is really important.
I 100% agree. So we have been chatting for a while.
We have.
And this is a fantastic conversation, and I could probably chat about this all day. It has been a really wide-ranging conversation, which is really fantastic. And I think you've come prepared and covered off all the things I was going to ask anyway.
Good.
Without me necessarily having to ask all of them. I do have a couple of final questions. This is around some key takeaways that perhaps women can take away from our conversation today. So if after listening to this episode, a listener wants to take some immediate action, what are 3 things she can do?
Yes. So I'd say the first thing is to get a really clear picture of where you are right now. So let's just take embarrassment, any feelings of not being happy with where you are or just a lack of confidence or whatever it might be. Let's take all of that off the table, and we're just going to be being very clear about where your superannuation sits today and how much it's worth. That's the number one thing. The next thing is to start educating yourself and start taking action. And you can turn this into a game, right? Set some goals. How am I going to start growing my superannuation? What are the things that I can do to start getting more money into my super fund? That's really important. So it might be speaking to your employer. It might be speaking to your accountant. It might be getting some financial advice. It may be, what can I sell? And I'm going to contribute some of that money into my super fund. Okay. Can I declutter my house? Do I have things that I don't need? How can I simplify my life? Let's just say that you have all kinds of resources available to you that could be turned into money that you could put into your superannuation funds. Okay. Set a goal for yourself to what you want it to get it to this year, next year, make it super short term, and then start looking at resourceful ways that you can find money to boost your super. And actually, I've got a specific one for you that I use, and it's called Finder Shopping now. It used to be called Grow My Super, but essentially it is a online platform. So it's called Finder Shopping, and you can link your super fund, and it's safe. I've used this for many years, and I've established that this is legitimate. Otherwise, I wouldn't recommend it. But you can link and basically have the ability that as you shop, that money is being contributed into your super fund. And it's little amounts. Like I might get $3 or $4 or $5, maybe sometimes $20, $30 as a monthly
Wow.
contribution off this platform into my super fund. You have the option of putting it off your mortgage or your super, but I get it put into my super fund because I'm really like deliberate about
Yeah. Yeah.
maximizing any opportunity for extra super. So that's something to have a look at. It's just a little bit of bonus money going into your super fund as you're shopping anyway. If I buy flights, if I buy accommodation, my regular shopping, little contributions are going into my super and it costs me absolutely nothing. So that's a little hack. And it actually does map what that would look like. What would that $20 or $30 or 40? I think at the moment I'm probably at about 600 and something dollars over the time I've used it that's gone in. How much is that worth over 20, 30, 40 years? Like what would that look like? Yeah, it's actually a lot of money. So
Is that Finder as in F-I-N-D-A or Finder as in
Finder
F-I-N-D-E-R? Yep. Okay.
shopping. Yes. And so you can link up your super fund and get
Hmm.
contributions that way.
All right. That's awesome.
Okay, so knowing where you are, growing your super a priority and a game. How am I going to do that? And even if I'm going to be a little bit cheeky here because we started off talking about super gaps, but if you are in a relationship, maybe
Yep.
find out how much they've got. And, what can I do to close that gap?
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
you don't need to tell them, but
Yep.
it sets like a benchmark. It sets like something to strive for. It's not like something that's probably not healthy to say I'm trying to beat you.
I was going to say, and if you happen to be a very competitive athlete or type A personality, that might be the best game to play.
I don't know, like it's fun and it's real money. And what is the point of earning money and working your whole life and striving for better things if you're not going to enjoy it along the way?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
make it fun, make it a challenge. Have fun with your kids, challenge them to have fun with their super as well and see just so that they're engaged. We don't engage with stuff that is boring and uninteresting and doesn't feel real. But if you can get to the point where you fully understand this is real money, it is
Yeah.
yours, you will have access to it one day and it will make a difference to your life, and then have fun with it. I think that's really important. And I think, I've said quite a few times around the importance of financial advice. One thing I haven't mentioned, which is so, so important, is that the emerging risks around cyber,
Yeah.
AI, and the potential for financial advice to be coming out of ChatGPT or linking up accounts to, online platforms. Be so careful. It's not always technology. There's people usually behind the technology. Technology does not operate alone. Okay. There are scams. There's romance scams. There's financial scams. There are people who present really well who are not qualified. So just make sure that you know that you're dealing with a real person with real qualifications and real experience. Look for recommendations and just be really careful that you develop a relationship with a good quality advisor and you are protecting yourself from the potential for financial abuse, the potential for
Yeah.
falling victim to a scam. And that's where not only building trust and open conversations with your family members, but also whoever you're trusting to help you on this journey is so important. Because there's people who have financial advisors and have had really good quality advice who get themselves involved in a romance scam or some form of like crypto scam or some promise of really high returns. We're going to solve all your problems. We're going to take you from zero to hero overnight. And maybe something in their gut says, this doesn't feel right, or for whatever reason, they don't tell anyone. And suddenly what they have been able to build disappears really
Yeah.
quickly. And that
Yep.
is really worrying for me. I've gone into studying cyber security. For me, that's the biggest risk, is that bad actors can get a hold of your money and they can make it disappear so quickly because of crypto and AI, and they just get quick access. They're super believable and your money's gone before you know it. So it's really important that you're always communicating and you're not hiding anything, and you're seeking qualified financial advice from a person. Just be really careful with technology. I think just a really important message that we hadn't spoken about before.
Yeah, that's true.
But again, it speaks to the importance of quality advice.
I think that is really important because they count on you being so ashamed that you're not going to talk to anybody about a situation like that, and that's how they get you. Recently, I saw something from a well-known podcaster, let's call her Mel Robbins, about copying and pasting all your banking details into Copilot and asking it to help me with my money. But I had a really, really huge issue with that because when the product is free, the data is you, and it's like handing over the keys to your bank account or your home to AI. Do not do that.
So she was advocating for people to do that.
It was a partnership with Microsoft and Copilot.
No, terrible advice. No, there is. So these companies are very much partnering with apps and providers around hooking in financial advice, and they're justifying it by saying that people are already using it for this. Okay, that does not justify commercializing something that puts people's it's not just the money that you have, it's your identity. Okay, you can potentially lose more than whatever you've got in the bank account. And unfortunately, people, particularly the younger generations, because a lot of the younger generations are pretty blasé about like the risk of identity theft, and also potentially they don't have as much money to lose. So they're not really thinking about how that money would grow over time, like happier to take risks and potentially just looking for a fast, quick answer. But the long-term risk is significant of putting any sensitive personal financial information into any of those models. It's not even the secure, marketable. It goes beyond what do they use? What do they use that information for? It's who could see it, who could access
that's right.
it. Cyber criminals, it's a profession. It's an industry. Cyber criminals are constantly stealing data and information. They're extortionists. They demand ransoms, and superannuation is such a large pool of money.
Yes, yeah.
And then, like, what else do they get access to? It's so dangerous. So deal with people in Australia who are qualified. If you want to get into a self-managed super fund, specifically look at the SMSF Professionals Association and find an accredited SMSF advisor. They can help you set one up. They can help you with advice and strategies over the life of that, and, facilitate a lot of those conversations that maybe you just don't feel equipped to have yourself, but advisors can help you with that process. So that's really important. Otherwise, if you're not setting up a self-managed super fund, your super fund will have advisors, or you could go and see a financial advisor yourself. But just make sure that they have the appropriate qualifications and that you get some references along the way to choose the one that feels right for you.
Yeah. That's excellent advice.
You can talk about most subjects in life right now: dating, divorce, all these different elements like redundancy, like what's happening in the workforce. It's just impossible to ignore the risks and opportunities that come with technology now. And so you want for this to be the most relevant current conversation, it's so important to at least just make sure it's on your radar as you're going through this process. Because I would hate to go and do all these positive things with great intentions and then just come across the wrong person and then just be taken advantage of in some way. It's really important to just be well supported and to be able to move forward with confidence and ultimately achieve the goals that you'd like for yourself, so that you are proud of what you've managed to achieve. And that starts now.
One last question before we wrap up, I promise. And we have talked about some things that women can do, have a look at their super, understand insurances and that sort of things. But my last question is, what's the one conversation that every woman should have by the end of this month? And I'm going to give the listeners a bit of a challenge to do this.
I really think it's about looking in the mirror and taking responsibility for your own life. So I'm actually going to go with the Michael Jackson, right? Because I've watched that movie multiple times. Man in the mirror, okay? It starts
Yeah.
with you and it is your responsibility. Hard conversations and embarrassing moments and starting where you are, like at the foundations of it, it just comes down to personal responsibility for your own life and for your own future. And the best person to take responsibility of that is you. Giving control of that to other people or just assuming that other people have your best interests at heart, it's not getting to the fundamental issue, which is your wealth and your life and your superannuation. It's your money
Yep.
and it's your responsibility. So, just having a think about looking yourself in the mirror, how do I be the mature adult and how am I going to look after myself? Because put your own mask on first. You look after yourself. There's nothing selfish about that. It is the amount of benefit that has for the people you love. It's just infinite, the benefits that will have for other people. It can change how you feel about yourself, the confidence that you have as a woman, and potentially the decisions that you make for yourself going forward.
Don't give away your power. Thanks, Joe. This has been a fantastic conversation. It has been wide ranging. It's also been quite lengthy, but extremely useful, powerful, and enjoyable. Thank you very, very much for that. Just some really good takeaways from this conversation, and I think some really good key messages that we can pass on to the listeners. So I'd like to thank you once again for coming on the
Thank
podcast.
you so much. I really appreciate being back. And obviously, it's amazing to hear that it is actually reaching women who are potentially going to go and impact not only their own lives, but the other women that they speak to and might share the podcast with as well. So I'm happy to come back anytime. And I really hope that this will be as well received as the first one.
If this one resonated with you, and especially if a particular stat or moment made you sit up, please do me a favour and share it with one woman in your life who needs to hear it. Forward the link, send it in a group chat, or post the episode to your stories. This is exactly the kind of conversation that grows by word of mouth, and you sharing it does more for this podcast than almost anything else. And if you've got a second, hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. Leave a rating if the platform lets you. It is genuinely the difference between this podcast being found and not being found, and it costs nothing. A quick housekeeping note, Unfiltered and Unbound is not sponsored, so nobody is paying me to do this. I do it because I think these conversations matter and the women having them are not being properly served elsewhere. So if you'd like to support the show and keep it ad-free, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. Single coffee from you genuinely helps, and that's not a metaphor. That's actual coffee money that keeps me at my desk. I'll see you next time on Unfiltered and Unbound.